Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is Watermelon Lime Zinger from Celestial Seasonings, which is an herbal tea, and it's a summery tea, although why am I running the air conditioner and drinking hot tea? I don't know. It's 90 degrees out. Nothing makes sense anymore. What can you do? Please bear with me. Well, it is July, speaking of hot weather, and of course that means Jane Austen July, which means I'm thinking a lot about the characters in Jane Austen's novels, as well as other things related to her writing and her life. And I was thinking about something that Jane Austen wrote a lot about, which she must have had a good amount of knowledge of, which is sisters-in-law, or for the most part, potential sisters-in-law, because most of the books, there are people that they're not sisters-in-law yet, most of the time. And Jane Austen had a bunch of brothers. She and her sister Cassandra were the only sisters. And then there were a bunch of other brothers, so some of whom were married more than once. So there were a lot of sisters-in-law in Jane Austen's acquaintance, some of whom she got along with, some of whom doesn't look like it was always that great a relationship, depending on which one. So she had product knowledge there. I personally don't have any sisters-in-law. I am a sister-in-law though, and I hope I'm a good one. One can only hope. And when I compare myself to the characters in Jane Austen's novels, I come out okay. And but what I decided to do today was to talk about some of the sisters-in-law, mainly the ones that feature a little regularly, somewhat, in the story, because there are some that are referred to that aren't really appearing in the story. They don't, in my opinion, really count. And there are people who, when I say sisters-in-law, never become, so I can't really mention Isabella Thorpe. And now, I should backtrack. Sorry if you haven't read that book, but I should say also that if you're gonna watch this and listen to this, please understand, while the traffic goes by, please understand that there are going to be spoilers. I'm going to probably say things that, if you haven't read these books, then prepare to be spoiled. I cover, I believe, 3, 4, 5 of her novels. I do not count Emma. Emma had a brother-in-law. If there's other sisters-in-law, I don't really remember, and I'm trying also to focus on sisters-in-law of the protagonist in the story, and there's a little bit of a tweaking here, because there's at least one story in which the main protagonist is one person, and I'm talking about another person at one point, but they're pretty main character too, so I think it counts. So I was going to do a ranking from like the worst to the best, but this one, what I'm really going to do is talk about 3 not great ones and 3 great ones, and you can order them the way you like, because they change in my mind of who's the worst and who's the absolute best. So just when I'm talking about the first 3, those are the bad ones, and the top 3 are the top 3, but they're just not in that order. Anyway, I think that's enough said. Let's get started. So I'm going to start with who probably is the worst one, but she's got competition, and that is Fanny Dashwood. This is the double sister-in-law, because at the outset of the story, Eleanor, Marianne, and Margaret are 3 sisters. Mostly we talk about Eleanor here though, and their brother, half-brother, but still brother, John, is married to Fanny, who used to be Fanny Ferrers. So, yes, as the story begins, she is their sister-in-law, right? So, I also wanted to give a I'm sorry moment, or apologize in advance if I must. Just in case I get a first name wrong or a title wrong. Sometimes I give the wrong military rank to a character, or the wrong first name. If I do that at some point, you are welcome to correct me, but it'll happen sometimes. Because so often the last names are featured more than anything, and because I don't really have a great knowledge for rank, which is sad because I do have military, or have had military in my family, but I haven't had British military, so whatever. Anyway, at least not in the past century or so. Anyway, so I'm talking about Fanny Dashwood, and she is horrible. She's horrible. I don't like to call people horrible, even if they're fictional, but she's horrible. She's a villain. She doesn't have, in my opinion, anything redeeming about her, besides the fact that she loves her son, but who knows how much that extends, because if she's learned anything from her mother, maybe that love will not be an extremely good one. But we're not talking about the relationship with her son. She's got these younger girls basically as her sisters-in-law, and it's okay, they don't have to be best friends, no one expects that. But when their father dies, they're left penniless because he couldn't control the will. He couldn't control where everything was going to go, so he couldn't leave riches to his daughters. I think he would have if it were up to him, because the Dashwoods, the John Dashwoods have enough, although they would always say that they don't. But the worst thing is that the father does try to make his son promise, please give something to my daughters. And obviously the father should have been more specific and said, please give X amount of money, but he doesn't. He leaves it a little vague. Maybe he was sick, so he didn't think about it. But this enables Fanny to talk to her husband and bargain him down, as it were, to nothing. They're not going to get anything. They may get the occasional, meat or something, if they live nearby, which they didn't. So really nothing. Barely even, I think, even a note in the middle of the year to say, how are you? Probably not even that. I don't know. But she does that first. And I know her husband could have put his foot down too and said, well, no, I'm doing this for my sisters. They are my sisters. But still, she really is the one who's pushing for it. And then turns around, and when her brother is showing some interest in Eleanor, so now they are potential double sisters-in-law, she makes it clear to all who listen that, no, my mother is going to really disapprove of this. Of course she's going to disapprove of this because Eleanor doesn't have money. Well, of course she doesn't have money. You didn't even let her have a little bit of money. So everything about her is unkind. I don't think she tries to go after anybody to be nasty, but she's just not helpful at all. And there's no love shown between her and Eleanor, anyone else really. Terrible people, that whole side of the family, but especially her, I think. She does, the fact that she gets the shock of her life when she finds out that Lucy Steele is engaged to her brother is very short-lived in terms of justice, but it's still a great moment when you hear about it. So, and of course, if you ever watch the adaptation, it's not exactly true to the one from '95. It's not exactly true to the story, but her reaction is worth watching. It's excellent. But anyway, so moving on from her, because I should not be able to repeat her name again because she's just annoying. Let's get to the book that everybody always talks about, which of course is Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice. And there are actually two sisters-in-law in this story that I will talk about, but right now I'm still in the sisters-in-law. And so I'm actually not, when I mentioned I wasn't going to veer off a little bit from the main character, I'm going to talk for a moment about the sort of other main character, who is Jane Bennet. So, of course, when we're talking about Jane Bennet, we're mainly talking about the sister-in-law, Caroline Bingley. But it's a little bit of a set here, too, because she does have another sister, Louisa, I think her name is Louisa Hurst, who is married. And I think not great either, but she's, in her married world, is not as vocally involved in everything. She's just not nice either. But I'll focus more on Caroline, and I know she's kind of young Even though sometimes the people who played her in adaptations look older, she is, the way she's referred to, she might be younger than Elizabeth. I'm not sure. But nevertheless, she is coming to town. They're letting Netherfield, her brother Charles, is wealthy, and she's keeping house for him, which was something that unmarried sisters often did for married brothers. And so that's good. But she meets the people of the area and isn't really a fan, but she takes a mild liking to Jane, because what's not to like? Jane is a nice, kind person, sweet, lovely, and I think honestly, if there was no brother involved, she might have maybe not been besties with Jane, but she might have at least been more civil and kinder. But Jane's not the problem, it's her baggage. And Jane has not only embarrassing parents and embarrassing sisters, but she also has a sister who, to Caroline, is a threat, because even though Elizabeth doesn't show any liking for Mr. Darcy, Caroline sees the tension. She sees something going on, and she's jealous, and she's trying also to get in between Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet, because she wants Mr. Darcy, of course. But obviously, if her brother were to marry Jane, not only would she be saddled with these embarrassing in-laws, because they were kind of embarrassing, and probably not bringing much in the way of money into the relationship, though that shouldn't have mattered, but that would bring Elizabeth possibly closer to Darcy, because Bingley and Darcy are best friends, and that's going to happen. So Caroline just, yes, she invites Jane over, but she does so at a time when supposedly the men in the house aren't going to be around. If it wasn't for the fact that Jane got sick, she may not have seen them. But also, she just keeps throwing all kinds of barbs at Elizabeth Bennet, and she's just a mean girl, and not very nice. But that wouldn't be the big problem, because she's allowed to be not a sweetheart, but she is part of the party that talks her brother into forgetting about Jane, getting out of the area, go back to London, moving on. Of course, Mr. Darcy does that too. He shares the blame, but we're not talking about him today. He gets his own issues. But Caroline is definitely a part of this. And anyone, to me, who tries to get two people who are definitely in love away from each other, especially when there's really nothing wrong with the two of them getting together, bad person. Badly done. So, yeah, she's not great. The only positive thing I could say for her is that I do feel bad for her, because she is in that impossible position of being single and apparently not getting a lot of attention from the one she's interested in. I feel a little bad for her about that. But she's got money. She could probably find someone else. I don't know. Maybe just her attitude is bad. But it probably exists in this world. There's either fan fiction or a novel written based on Pride and Prejudice. I have not found one that redeems her yet. I want actually a good one that makes Caroline out to have, once she's maybe on her own and makes other friends and finds somebody for herself who's not Mr. Darcy, maybe she'll change. Maybe she'll be better. I don't know. I think there's a possibility, but it's not a major one. I just think she's slightly nicer, maybe, than Fanny Dashwood. I don't know. I just I do kind of weirdly like Caroline, and not that I like her, but I like reading about her, because she's, we like the mean girls, even though we don't like them. Anyway, she's well written. So now we're going on. We've had 2 books here, and we are moving on to, I don't have this with me. Oh well, just picture a book. Mansfield Park. And this is also 2 sisters. I'm mostly talking about Maria and Julia Bertram, who are cousins, so they're already related, to Fanny Price. And they, I mean, if I was going to do a ranking of sisters, they couldn't really, they couldn't really, they wouldn't qualify because they're not technically sisters, but even she's sort of almost like an adopted sister, and they don't treat her well anyway. So on the outset, they're not great. I I think that bothers me in terms of the relationship. I know this sounds weird, but because Mariah and Julia are both not really kind to Fanny when she arrives, they're really snobby, they don't really regard her. The only sibling that pays attention is Edmund. And he's not that great. I'm sorry, he's not great. We root for him only because Fanny wants him. That's the only reason we have any encouragement of them getting together, is because we know that that's what she wants, really. But, is it possible that his kindness compared to their not being at all helpful just made him look better? He was just being kind as anyone should be, and maybe just by comparison, he becomes the hero, and he's really not the hero. So in a sense, they did us no favors by bringing them close together. So that in itself isn't great. But also, why do people decide they're going to start banging things outside my window? You probably can't hear it because of the air conditioning. Whatever. This is the world we live in. Anyway, but also I believe there's a point at which Mariah does report some of Fanny's doings to her Aunt Norris, and even though they weren't yet potential sisters-in-law, that's nasty, because Mrs. Norris, if I'm ever going to do a ranking of aunts and uncles, she is the worst. I think she's the worst. There are some good ones, but she's the worst, and to get involved in anyway. So I don't think they're incredibly discouraging of the couple getting together. I don't think they want it, but yeah, it's like, just if you wanted to find sisters out of your sisters-in-law relationships, this is not where you're going to find them. That's all. They may not be the worst sisters-in-law, but they're never going to be good. So now I'm going to get into the nicer ones. And these are people that if you married into a family, you would be happy to have these people as your sister-in-law. You would be happy to be their friend, probably. And I'm going to start with my favorite book, Persuasion. Lovely Persuasion. And I think the oldest. I could be wrong, but I think she's the oldest of the sisters-in-law. Fanny Dashwood's not quite up there yet, I don't think. But I could be wrong. And that's Mrs. Croft, who is Frederick Wentworth, Captain Wentworth's sister. And she is described as being a bit weathered-looking, looking older than her 38 years. So she's a bit older than Anne Elliot. How could I forget her name? Anne Elliot. And but they say she looks older because she's a little weather-worn. Which side point there? It's supposed to be from Anne's point of view. So if she's noticing the weather-worn complexion, it doesn't mean that she's a horrible person to notice that. But I do think that there's a little bit of the Elliot observation in her, but just not as bad. Anyway, but that has nothing to do with it, except for the fact that she is also a sister-in-law to be Anne Elliot. So that's a slight, very, very, very slight, and probably imagined criticism. But anyway, Mrs. Croft is not just a potential sister-in-law, or she would have definitely been, because she was engaged to Captain Wentworth before they broke up. But she is moving into, I think is it Kellynch Hall, where the Elliots lived, but they are retrenching. They're having money problems, so they're moving to Bath and renting out their home to this couple, this military couple, as it were, and who have money, which is great, except it must be weird for Anne to have to visit, because she's still in the area, in the neighborhood, and so she does see them. But Mrs. Croft doesn't show herself to be, I think as the book says, to be biased or to be in any way mean to her at all. She's completely kind to her. Yes, it is in here somewhere. There was a little, oh yes, here it is. This one paragraph just says, Mrs. Croft always met her with a kindness which gave her the pleasure of fancying herself a favorite, and on the present occasion, receiving her in that house, there was particular attention. That's about something else. But that's what I mean. It's that feeling of, did she really look at Anne as a favorite, or is she just kind? It doesn't matter. She's kind. She's supportive. She also, because if I'm ever going to do a ranking of couples, the Crofts would probably be number one because they are the best of the married couples, I think. They're just so close. They're loving, and they're together even on the ship. They stay together. And just by that, just these kind of conversations, she encourages marriage to a naval officer. And which, as someone who is seasick, I couldn't even imagine. But I think it helps Anne because even though these conversations happen before Anne even has hope of getting back together with Captain Wentworth, it's still a very positive viewpoint, and you could tell that this is going to be a good sister-in-law. And Anne has not good siblings. She has a sister, Elizabeth, I think, who is just not nice. She's vain like her father. She dismisses Anne in all possible ways. And then her other sister, Mary, who I think, my brain again, who isn't evil, but is very self-centered and just thinks about her own comforts. So to find someone like this who is just very gracious and caring, offers her a ride when everybody's walking and she looks fatigued, in her little ways, she seems to almost contribute to their relationship, whether knowingly or unknowingly. I'll take it. And so now we move back to Pride and Prejudice. You saw the book already. Now, this is a character who doesn't really have much in the way of lines. You don't really get to know her too well, but that's okay, because everything you do see about her is good. And that is Georgiana Darcy, Mr. Darcy's much younger sister. Now, he's sort of a father figure to her because of their age difference, and he's very protective of her, which isn't a bad thing. In a way, Georgiana hero worships him. So I do feel like it would be hard for her to see any wrongs in her brother. In doing that, though, that doesn't mean that I don't think she would necessarily be mean to anyone approaching her potential, her brother. Really, I think there's a line in which she sees Elizabeth, and this is a kind of an innocent thing to say, but she sees Elizabeth Bennet, and her thinking is, well, if my brother feels the way he does for her, then she must be good. She must be worth it. Which is nice. It's a faith that not everyone has in their sisters or brothers or anybody. So that's nice. Like I said, it might be a little naive, because who's to say that Mr. Darcy has the best taste in women? Oh, there's my bottle of water. Sorry, distraction. But it's nice. I appreciate that about her. But then moving to the future, when they do get married and Elizabeth moves into, oh my goodness, Pemberley. Who forgets Pemberley? I forget Pemberley. I need to take some kind of memory supplements or something. Anyway, I remembered it pretty quickly. Anyway, they turn out to become loving friends and sisters. Of course, Elizabeth has experience being a sister, but I have always thought of Elizabeth as not the best sister, which sounds weird. She's very good to Jane. She's not terrible to the rest of her sisters, but I don't think she's that. She's more about Jane and a little less about the rest. Just saying. But she is very good to Georgiana, and Georgiana is very good to her, and they seem to have a very complete, happy family situation, which is the best thing you could ask for. Yes, Pemberley might be huge, and you might sometimes go a good chunk of time without having to see each other, but you're still going to have dealings with each other, and it's good. It's good. That's the way it's going to be. So I like her. I like Georgiana. And, she's also very musical. It's nice to have someone musical in the days of not having, a stereo system. So last but not least is Eleanor Tilney from, I recently read, Northanger Abbey. There it is. And she is I know I wasn't going to talk about Isabella Thorpe here, but she does stand out in contrast by being a lot less selfish, a lot less silly. Obviously, we don't know much about her in the beginning, except we do realize, I mean, because Henry Tilney is just amazing. So, but you realize that Henry and Eleanor have a really good brother-sister relationship. So already that's good. When you can see, siblings that get along very well. They have another sibling who is not great. So it's nice that they're together. And their father's not great, and their mother is dead. So already, I think Catherine Morland, when she meets these siblings, she doesn't just love Henry, but she also feels good about Eleanor. I think she sees the contrast already. She may not realize it yet because she's a little silly, but she sees something different about Eleanor to Isabella, and she's not wrong about that. And Eleanor seems to be interested in things like literature and things that Catherine will be into, and that is great. So they're already going to be good friends. She's very happy to have Catherine come with them back to Northanger Abbey. And she even expresses how much she wants to have someone like that in her life, someone who's like a sister to her, because she doesn't have sisters and she could really use not just a sister but a friend. She's very open about that, which is so nice. We love someone who's open but not, I guess, vulgar in these stories. Someone who can express themselves and their feelings, but they're not too much, over much. So she's a calming influence in this story. And I feel like she puts up with a lot at home. She was interested in a man who wasn't good enough for her father. But then Eleanor comes in handy too, because once her father finds out that Catherine's not as well off as he thought she was, and he sends her away. First of all, Eleanor, tries to help her, give her money, and it gives her a way of contacting her, because she really does care. She really feels terrible about the whole situation. But then later on, when Henry finds out, and he's like, nope, I'm going to go after her, and I don't care what you think to father. That could have put him in a bad place. But even though Eleanor didn't intend to do this, it wasn't her choice, her potential, her love, the love of her life, does somehow end up inheriting money and getting a title, which obviously was something Eleanor did, but now he's marriageable. So now, in them getting married, the father is so happy that he doesn't really care so much about Henry and Catherine. It's like, okay, fine, whatever. Yeah, whatever. All right. So even though that was more by default, still, she is a good sister-in-law. So anyway, I hope you like this kind of rambly, chatty talk about the sisters-in-law of Jane Austen. Let me know what you think of these characters, if I've missed any, and if you think I should explore someday Jane Austen's actual sisters-in-law, or if I should talk about any other relatives or relationships in these stories. Let me know. If you like talking about these subjects, please please subscribe, all the things. I am going on to close to 30 minutes, so I think we've had enough for now. This is Catherine at Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely book and tea filled day.